Hi, my name is Marianne Claiborne, and today I'm going to be doing a case overview of a client who is a 12-year-old female and living in foster care. Her mother's pregnancy was normal, and the client was delivered vaginally with no complications. She experienced normal development until she reached the age of 5, and then from the age of 5 through 11, the client was sexually abused on many occasions by her stepfather. The child tried to tell her mother, and her mother did not believe her. And then she tried to tell her aunt, and her aunt moved the blame from the child's stepfather to a neighbor. During this time, the client's social skills and grades at school started to suffer, and she began to isolate herself from her peers. So finally, after the client's older sister spoke out about the sexual abuse that she personally was experiencing, then the police and DCFS got involved, and all of the children in this home were taken away and put into foster care. So some of the symptoms associated with the client is she currently experiences nightmares and vivid flashbacks of the abuse. She suffers from sleep deprivation and experiences guilt associated with her desire to look at pornographic content, while also feeling like a bad person for viewing that content. She generally engages in these behaviors about once a week, but sometimes it goes out longer. Sometimes she feels like it would be better if she fell asleep and never woke up. And on the Columbia or the ZSSRS rating scale, she scored a 3, meaning that she is experiencing non-specific active suicidal thoughts. The client also states that she has a difficult time going near her bed, so she will often sleep on the floor, and this will disrupt her sleeping patterns, making it so that she does not rest well and is often tired. She also is sad. She displays sad emotion and difficulty cultivating relationships with other people in her life. And she's currently living with her third foster care family. A previous foster care family stated that they had a hard time dealing with her flashbacks, her sleeping habits, the flat affect and the low mood that she often demonstrates, and outbursts over trivial matters, as they put it. Sometimes they would try to cheer her up by giving her a hug or a snuggle, and in various occasions, she displayed physically violent reactions to these forms of attention. Now, some of her foster parents also say that they worry about leaving her alone with their other children for fear that she may sexually assault someone who is smaller than her. Her other peers at school or even her teachers have commented on how jumpy she is, and they've mentioned the burn scars on her arms and her legs. Her dream is to find a quote unquote real family like what other kids have, what she's seen in other homes. And every time she is moved to a new home, it's completely devastating for her. She will cry for weeks, even if she didn't have a specifically strong attachment to the family she was living with previously. Right now, it's going a lot better in the home that she's in, which is exciting, but it's also stressful for her for fear that she's going to get moved again. She worries about that excessively. Now, going on to her DSM-5 diagnoses, clearly based off her symptomology, the client's primary diagnosis is PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's F43.10. Now, this is based off the following criteria. She was exposed to an actual or threatened situation with sexual violence, and she directly experienced that event. She also was aware of what was happening to her sister, so she saw it within the home with her sister as well. There was also presence of several of the following intrusive symptoms. She experiences recurrent, involuntary, and intrusive distressing memories of traumatic events. She has memory of them generally, but not specifically. It's interesting because she can't remember specifically what happened, like was it always during the day or was it always at night, and how often, and things like that. The details are hard for her to pin down, but she has general memories of the sexual violence. She also has recurrent distressing dreams in which the content and or the effect of the dream are related to the traumatic event. And so, yeah, she has those dreams which disrupt her sleep patterns. She also has dissociative reactions or flashbacks in which she feels or acts as if the traumatic event were reoccurring. And so she does have those flashbacks. There are more here, but I'm going to move ahead to section C, where she persistently avoids external reminders of people, places, conversation, activities, objects, situations that arouse the distressing memories, thoughts, or feelings about or closely associated with the traumatic event. So she does this when she avoids sleeping in her bed. She associates that with the sexual trauma, and she does not want to sleep in a bed, even if it's not the bed that she was abused in. She also has negative alterations in cognitions and mood associated with the traumatic events in at least 2 of the following bullet points. One is that she has the inability to remember important aspects of the traumatic events. And this one's tricky because there's no one there to say what important aspect that she's forgetting, but this is somewhat an assumption because she can't remember anything specific. She has generalized information, but anything specific, it's completely wiped. She can't remember. She also has a persistent and exaggerated negative belief or expectations about oneself, others, or the world, like thinking I am bad. And she has that predominantly in her thought processes, not just associated with her desire to look at the porn, but also just generally as a person. She talks about how she's a bad person. And then in the next section, she has irritable behavior and angry outbursts quite regularly, mostly with people that she lives with, like her foster care parents. She also engages in reckless or self-destructive behaviors, meaning she engages in some self-harm. She also has an exaggerated startled response, which her teachers have noticed and her peers at school. And she has problems concentrating, which affects her education. And clearly she has the sleep disturbance. So there's quite a few bullet points in that one that apply. Now, she has experienced this for more than 1 month. And so that's important. That's a criteria. And the disturbance causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, and or other important areas of functioning. And this is not brought on by substance use or another medical condition. So she meets all the criteria for PTSD. And this is manifested often through her flat affect and her low mood. Now, a differential diagnosis for PTSD is the acute stress disorder, or ASD. It has similar symptoms, but it must only last for 1 month after a traumatic event. And this has been going on with her for years. And so that length of time is a factor. She is clearly experiencing PTSD. Now, the client is also suffering from several other disorders. However, we don't have time to go into each one of them, but I'll briefly outline them. So the client is suffering from impulse disorder unspecified, which is F63.9. This is based on the client's experiencing a difficult time telling herself no when the desire to look at pornographic materials comes her way. And this can also affect her in other ways, like physical or verbal aggression, which is based on that lack of impulse control. Now, the child is not experiencing a full-blown addiction to porn because she does not look at it every day. She tries to fight it off, and she only looks at it possibly once a week. And she's getting better. It's sometimes longer than that now. But because she's not viewing it every 1 or 2 days, it's not a full-blown addiction yet. It's this impulse disorder unspecified. Now, the client is also experiencing an adjustment disorder, and this is manifested when the client has a hard time adjusting to new situations like a new foster care home or a new classroom. And this, unfortunately, has happened quite a bit since she was put into foster care. And so that has complicated the situation. She may also be experiencing reactive attachment disorder, which is the F94.1. And this is demonstrated when the child displays a lack of attachment to adults or caregivers. So to cope, instead of seeking attention or help from adults or caregivers, she engages in self-harm by burning herself on the arms or the legs. And overall, this disorder is particularly concerning because according to the research, reactive attachment disorder can turn into borderline personality disorder. And that's F60.3, which, if you're familiar with that disorder, it's its own beast. And so early intervention to potentially stop the child from developing the borderline personality disorder would be very, very useful. All right, just a couple of the challenges associated with this. Social justice challenge is that this was a child who was repetitively raped, and she has blocked the memory, which means that she does not have the memory to give to the police. She can say generally what happened, but specifics, she can't do that. Her sister knew what happened to her personally, but she was not in a place where she was observing what was happening to her little sister and could give details as well. The parents are clearly not going to give a clear description of what happened. And so in a case like this, we have to assume that we do not have all the details. We can ask important people like DCFS, and they can give an analysis of what they saw, or her foster parents, or the police, but those people were not there seeing the abuse. And so because of that, in a situation like this, we don't have all of the information of what went on. So it's just important to remember that. And that's a challenge, especially in a court of law. How do you put someone in prison for a time frame for something they did when there was no one there to testify? And so that is a real social justice issue. Now, one of the pros and cons of diagnosis, in this case, a big pro of diagnosis is the ability to have insurance pay for services, because insurance will not continue to pay if they don't have a diagnosable need. And so because of that, that improves the child's ability to receive necessary services. Also, the child with that diagnosis, they can go to the foster care parents, explain what's going on, and that will help the foster care parents know how to intervene if the child is triggered and something happens and they need an intervention. It can help them to keep things calm until more help can get there if there's a need to bring in more help, or maybe just to have them there and to help that child work through their trauma. And that can be very helpful in a home setting. And so that's a definite pro. Now, a con is if this child could be diagnosed with 10 diagnoses, which is very possible. There's a lot more information I left out. Then in that case, if we were to give a child a diagnosis of 10 different diagnoses, that list could very easily be turned into the list of what is wrong with me, the list of why I am broken. And so, especially as you're dealing with an emerging teen who is starting to experience the joys of puberty, and that's complicated enough that to then factor in, this big long list of all these conditions that could negatively affect the mental wellness of that emerging teen, especially as they move into the teen years, which are a challenge. And so as a therapist, I think it's important for us to look at a situation like this and ask ourselves, is diagnosis going to help or hurt? Some of the diagnosis will definitely help. It'll help with the insurance. It'll help with the intervention. But will a big long list of diagnoses help or hurt? And in that case, I think that the answer is it could hurt. And so it's important to be careful of how many diagnoses we hand someone, especially when they're so young. And that is all I have to say. So thank you.